Usually when a massive, like a catastrophic hurricane hits a coastline, the damage assessment is a pretty straightforward process.
Right, yeah. You walk outside the next morning and you just expect to count the flattened houses.
Exactly. The storm hits, infrastructure is broken, and the economic toll is just visibly laid out in front of you. You expect a massive contraction.
Because crises destroy, right? They don't typically build structural expansions overnight.
Right, but imagine walking outside after the winds finally died down and realizing your house wasn't destroyed. In fact, it was completely renovated.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you suddenly have a brand new, fully functional addition built onto the back. You'd be standing in your yard wondering who on earth managed to do all this heavy construction in the middle of a Category 5 hurricane.
It completely defies all conventional economic logic of, how a crisis is supposed to impact an environment.
It really does. And welcome to the deep dive, because that is exactly the kind of macroeconomic puzzle we are unraveling for you today.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one.
Our mission is to explore this massive surprise in the post-pandemic economy. We're relying on this incredibly insightful research paper by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover, and it's titled The Frontier of Flexibility.
It's a great paper.
It is. We are looking at the massive clash between those early doom and gloom predictions, the idea that remote work would completely destroy productivity and permanently tank the labor market versus what the actual data is showing us now that the dust is finally settled.
Because the current data paints a picture that, honestly, almost no one saw coming back in 2020.
No, not at all.
I mean, economists were bracing for this scarring effect, like a lost generation of workers who would just drop out of the labor force entirely because that physical tie to the office was severed.
Well, I'm going to give you the punchline right out of the gate here. As of April 2026, the prime age labor force participation rate, so we are talking about folks aged 25 to 54, it didn't just recover from the pandemic.
Right.
It literally broke pre-pandemic levels. It hit 83.8%. The labor market actually got bigger.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
And to really understand why that happened, we have to kind of strip away the initial panic and that compound shock of 2020.
Yeah, because that was just chaos.
Total chaos.
Yeah.
The emergency lockdowns contracted the labor supply out of pure fear and, immediate caregiving crises, while demand just collapsed in the service sectors.
Right.
But that emergency phase tells us absolutely nothing about how thoughtfully implemented flexible work performs under normal, stable economic conditions.
Which is such a crucial distinction, I think. I mean, ask yourself, working from home because your kid's school is suddenly closed and you are in sheer survival mode, that is a completely different universe than working from home by design.
Exactly. When you remove the crisis element, you are left with a new kind of infrastructure.
Yeah.
It fundamentally changes how, and I think more importantly, who can participate in the economy.
Yeah.
So the obvious question becomes, well, where did all these new workers come from to drive participation up to 83.8%?
Right. Where did they come from?
And the answer lies in this concept called the possibility frontier of employment.
Okay, let's unpack this idea of a possibility frontier. Because it sounds a bit like a sci-fi concept, but how does it actually apply to everyday workers?
So think of it as the boundary of what is feasible for a human being to achieve in a 24-hour day.
Okay.
Historically, that boundary was rigidly defined by geography and commute times. The research notes that the pre-pandemic average commute in the U.S. was 27 minutes each way.
Wow.
Yeah. That is over 4 hours a week, just sitting in a car or a train.
Handing 4 hours a week back to someone is a massive behavioral shift.
It really is. It creates what labor economists call the commute dividend.
The commute dividend, I like that.
Yeah, and what's wild is that those 4 hours didn't just go back to, watching Netflix. The data shows people immediately reinvested that time.
Wait, really? Reinvested how?
Well, some used it for vital recovery, like extra sleep or family time, but a huge portion of the workforce actually used it to take on more work or to enter the labor market in the first place.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because for some populations, eliminating the commute isn't just about saving time, it's literally the defining factor between working and not working.
Right.
Take the disability employment gap, for example. Historically, the participation rate for working-age adults with disabilities hovers around 35%.
Okay.
Compare that to 78% for those without disabilities.
That is a staggering gap that we collectively accepted that as a permanent fixture of the economy for decades.
Exactly. Until the possibility frontier expanded. Remote work inherently removes physical accessibility barriers.
Yeah, of course.
It dramatically reduces the physical fatigue of a daily commute. It allows people to manage complex medical needs in private throughout the day.
And it probably limits exposure to office environments that might exacerbate chronic conditions, right?
Spot on. It structurally reshaped their ability to participate.
You know, that dynamic reminds me of the curb cut effect in urban planning.
Oh, yeah. Where an accommodation designed for one specific group ends up.
Yes. Like sloping a sidewalk for wheelchair users, it ends up making the infrastructure better for everyone.
Exactly. You put in the curb cuts for wheelchairs, but suddenly travelers with heavy luggage or delivery workers with hand trucks and parents pushing strollers, they are all benefiting.
Right. Remote work functioned as a massive digital curb cut. I mean, it was originally adopted as an emergency health accommodation, but it made the workplace structurally more viable for the entire workforce, particularly caregivers.
Caregiving is a prime example. The responsibilities there still fall disproportionately on women.
Yep.
Now, remote work doesn't magically erase the need for childcare, obviously,
No, definitely not.
but the temporal flexibility, the ability to shift hours around a school drop-off or a sudden fever, it makes holding down a full-time job vastly more compatible with those unpredictable caregiving demands.
I hear all of this and it sounds great, but I have to push back hard on this utopian vision.
Okay, lay it on me.
If we look closely at this expanding possibility frontier, isn't it incredibly unequal? I mean, it feels like we are just talking about folks with comfortable laptop jobs getting these life-changing benefits while the rest of the economy is completely left behind.
That is totally fair, and that is the critical macroeconomic friction we are grappling with right now. Education and professional credentials are massive, undeniable predictors of remote work access.
Right.
The data reveals that workers with a bachelor's degree or higher are roughly 4 times more likely to work remotely than those with only a high school education.
A 4 times multiplier. That creates an entirely bifurcated reality based purely on your diploma. We are essentially talking about two different versions of the American workday.
We are. Because remote work is overwhelmingly concentrated in knowledge-intensive sectors. So tech, finance, professional services, consulting.
Yeah.
Conversely, industries like healthcare delivery, retail, food service, and manufacturing, they are inherently physical. You cannot stock a grocery shelf or draw blood or operate a factory stamping machine from your living room couch.
No, you really can't.
So the benefits of this flexibility, the commute dividend, the autonomy, they accrue disproportionately to already advantaged workers.
Which legitimately risks widening the gap in job quality across the economy. We're left with a privileged class that gets to design their own work-life balance and a service class that is still rigidly tied to a clock and a physical location.
Right.
How is society handling that permanent divide?
It's an ongoing tension, for sure, and it's putting immense pressure on physical industries to compensate in other ways, like offering higher base wages or 4-day work weeks just to compete for talent.
Because they have to offer something.
Exactly, because this shift in the knowledge sector is permanent. The 2024 data from the Survey of Working Arrangements and Attitudes, they call it the SWA, it shows that roughly 30% of all full-time workdays in the U.S. are now performed remotely.
So it came down significantly from the 60% peak during the height of the pandemic.
Yes, it did.
But it settled vastly higher than the mere 5% baseline we had pre-pandemic. We jumped from 5% to 30% and just stayed there.
And if we connect this to the broader macroeconomic picture, it explains why employers are keeping these policies despite some very loud, very public executive pushback in the media demanding a return to the office.
Oh, yeah. We've all seen those headlines.
Right. Well, the Swasways survey found that 44% of employers explicitly state remote work allows them to recruit talent they simply could not access otherwise.
Wow. Almost half.
Yeah. They can hire specialized technical talent in Ohio or Texas without forcing them to relocate to hyper-expensive markets like San Francisco or New York.
And it keeps the people they already have from quitting, right?
Oh, absolutely.
The research highlights that turnover is reduced by 20 to 35% when companies offer genuine remote flexibility. That represents a massive cost savings in recruiting, onboarding, and lost institutional knowledge.
It's huge.
But I want to ask you, the listener, what stands out to you in all this data? Because for me, it's one very specific, very human number. Workers value this flexibility at roughly 8% of their wages.
Yeah, that blew my mind. It basically functions as a substantial invisible raise.
Exactly.
In a tight labor market, workers had the leverage to demand that flexibility as a core job attribute, and the market absorbed it as a permanent currency. If a recruiter offered a candidate an 8% pay cut to commute 5 days a week, The candidate would just end the interview.
They'd walk right out. So the employees love it. It acts as economic currency, and the companies are saving a fortune on turnover costs.
Yeah.
But I want to pivot to the friction managers are facing.
Yeah.
Because if I am an employee and I am not sitting at a cubicle from 9 to 5, my boss's absolute greatest fear is that I am at home playing video games or taking a nap. How are companies actually measuring if we are doing our jobs when the office is empty?
What's fascinating here is that anxiety stems from something called proximity bias.
Proximity bias.
Yeah. For decades, managers in physical offices relied on observation of effort as a lazy proxy for actual output.
Meaning, if I am furiously typing at my desk at 6:11 p.m., I must be a highly productive, dedicated employee.
Exactly. Even if you are just aggressively typing an email to your landlord or shopping online. Remote work removes that visual crutch entirely. You can no longer measure butts in seats. So companies are forced to undergo a foundational shift in management mechanics. They actually have to define and measure output.
Which sounds incredibly obvious, but how do you actually measure output for a role that isn't just producing widgets? I mean, if I'm a graphic designer or a strategic planner, how does a manager track my work without micromanaging my screen time?
It requires implementing objective frameworks like OKR's objectives and key results.
Okay.
Instead of a manager saying, I need you at your desk for 8 hours, the OKR becomes produce 3 prototype variations of the new homepage by Thursday at noon. The deliverable becomes the sole metric of success.
Oh, I see.
If the designer creates brilliant prototypes in 2 hours, great. If it takes them 20 hours, well, that is their own time management to solve. It forces managers to do the incredibly hard work of defining what a successful outcome actually looks like, rather than just praising perfect attendance.
And to make that work across different time zones, you need a massive shift toward asynchronous communication, don't you?
You do.
The research highlights GitLab, a company that has been fully remote since its founding. They have over 2,000 employees spread across 65 countries, and they operate on what they call a handbook-first model.
Yeah, the GitLab handbook is literally legendary in organizational design.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. It is a public document over 2,000 pages long that details every single process, decision-making framework, and company value. If an employee needs an answer to a complex operational question, they do not schedule a synchronous Zoom meeting and wait for a manager to wake up in a different hemisphere.
They just consult the handbook.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me.
All right.
I look at a 2,000-page document, and I immediately think of a massive lore wiki for a complex video game.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. When players want to know exactly how a specific mechanic works, they don't call the developers. They go to the community wiki because everything is rigorously documented. But how does a company keep a 2,000-page document from becoming a dusty, outdated mess?
Well, they treat the company policy exactly like software code. They use version control.
Oh, clever.
If an employee finds an outdated process, they submit a merge request to update the handbook. The change is debated asynchronously in text, approved, and immediately becomes the new official policy. If a process isn't documented in the handbook, it effectively does not exist.
And what that does culturally is completely eliminate the you had to be there exclusivity of traditional office politics. You no longer miss out on crucial context just because you weren't standing in the hallway when 2 executives made a casual decision near the elevator. It democratizes information.
Automatic, the company behind WordPress, takes this philosophy even further.
Oh, yeah.
They manage 1,900 employees in 90 countries with 0 physical headquarters.
Wait, 0?
0. They make almost all their decisions through internal blogs. Someone writes a detailed proposal, and colleagues critique and refine it in the comments over a few days.
That's so efficient.
And when they do need an all-hands meeting, they live stream it with text-based Q&A, ensuring that no matter what time zone you are in or whether you are an introvert or an extrovert, you can participate equally.
You know, even companies that aren't fully remote are rethinking how they measure work. Salesforce implemented a success from anywhere model.
Right.
They stopped looking at corporate hierarchy and started categorizing roles based on the actual daily task. Are you flex, fully remote, or office space? It depends entirely on what you actually do all day.
Which makes sense.
And implementing that objective task-based flexibility actually helped them achieve gender parity in their U.S. workforce.
Because it actively strips away the unwritten rules of office face time that historically disadvantage women and primary caregivers. When you evaluate purely on objective output, bias naturally shrinks.
Okay, I am completely on board with the efficiency of output measurement. But I have to push back again, this time on the cold, robotic nature of it all.
Fair enough.
Sure, asynchronous text is highly efficient. A 2,000-page wiki is efficient. But human beings are not just input-output machines. What happens to human connection? Doesn't company culture just wither and die if we never actually look each other in the eye?
It is a vital concern. The isolation is real, but the research shows that culture doesn't die in a distributed model. It simply changes its mechanism.
How so?
Well, in a physical office, culture happens by accident. It is osmosis. You overhear a fascinating conversation, you grab a spontaneous coffee, you build rapport. In a remote environment, you cannot rely on osmosis. Culture has to be meticulously and intentionally engineered.
So what does this all mean? It sounds like hoping a physical office builds culture by default is like putting a houseplant near a sink and hoping it waters itself.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. Just because the water is nearby doesn't mean the roots are absorbing it. An office provides proximity, not necessarily connection.
You still actually have to water it.
Exactly. Distributed companies realize they have to actively turn the faucet on. They have to adopt a distributed-first mindset.
What does a strict distributed first mindset look like in daily practice?
It means that if even one person on a team is remote, the entire process must operate as if everyone is remote.
Yeah.
Imagine you have a meeting of 5 people. 3 of them happen to be physically in the same office building that day, and 2 are working from home.
Oh, okay.
A distributed first company will mandate that those 3 people go to their own separate desks and log into the video call individually.
Wait, really? Even if they could just walk into a conference room together?
Especially if they could. Because the moment those 3 sit together around a single conference table, they form an inner circle.
Ah, I
They
saw.
make subtle eye contact, they read micro-expressions, they share side jokes. The 2 people dialing in on the screen instantly become second-class citizens, just peripheral observers struggling to find a pause in the audio to break into the conversation.
That makes total sense.
Forcing individual screens equalizes participation and eliminates the inner circle.
It's about designing a level playing field by default. And companies are weaving this intentionality into the hardest parts of the employee life cycle, like onboarding.
Yes, absolutely.
The research mentioned Shopify. They had to figure out how a brand new engineer learns the ropes without sitting next to a veteran and just watching them type.
Hi.
So they instituted highly structured remote onboarding with pairing sessions. 2 engineers jump on a call, share a single screen, and write code together for hours. They effectively recreated that informal learning by observation virtually.
And this intentional design extends beautifully into neurodivergent accessibility, too.
Oh, how so?
Microsoft expanded their autism hiring program specifically into fully remote roles.
Right.
They recognize that traditional conversational interviews, which heavily favor neurotypical social cues and eye contact, don't accurately assess the technical skills of candidates with different communication styles.
That's a great point.
Furthermore, remote work radically reduces the sensory overload of a loud, bright, unpredictable, open-plan office.
Yeah, open offices can be intense.
Very. Microsoft allowed for alternative interview formats, letting candidates demonstrate their skills through async work samples rather than forced dialogue. It fundamentally improved their talent pipeline.
That is incredible. But what about the water cooler, the spontaneous moments where you just shoot the breeze with a colleague? Can you engineer that?
You can. Companies like Zapier engineer serendipity all the time. They have 500 remote employees, and they actively build deep culture by flying everyone out for biannual in-person retreats.
Okay, so they still meet up.
Yes, but crucially, those retreats are not for doing routine laptop work. They are specifically designed for a strategic alignment, shared meals, and relationship building.
Got it.
And in between those physical meetups, they use software to randomly pair colleagues for virtual coffee breaks. They maintain robust Slack channels dedicated purely to hobbies and pets. They just do not leave human connection to chance.
They treat culture like an ongoing product design experiment. Dropbox is another great example from the research. They shifted to a virtual first model, and they rely heavily on quarterly employee surveys to continuously debug the system.
Oh, I love that approach.
Right. If employees report severe video fatigue, they rewrite the meeting guidelines to mandate more async updates. If home office ergonomic setups are causing back pain, they boost the equipment stipend. They iterate constantly.
To synthesize all of this, the core takeaway from Dr. Westover's research is undeniable. Remote work is not a temporary pandemic hangover, and it is far more than a nice-to-have HR perk.
It really is.
It is a permanent, structural expansion of the global economy. When implemented intentionally with a handbook-first mindset, role-based flexibility, and an absolute focus on output rather than hours logged, it creates a workforce that is significantly more resilient and accessible.
I would encourage you, the listener, to look critically at your own work environment tomorrow morning. Are you operating in a genuine distributed first culture that values clear deliverables and intentional connection?
That's the real test.
Or are you stuck in a hybrid failure mode where executive policy is claimed to offer modern flexibility, but proximity bias and the physical inner circle still silently dictate who gets promoted?
It is definitely the defining diagnostic question for the next decade of management.
Absolutely. And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as we wrap up. Something that pushes the boundaries of this research into completely uncharted territory.
Ooh, what's that?
If remote work permanently severs the physical tie between geography and employment, how is this going to reshape our fundamental sense of local community?
Oh, wow. That's a big question.
Think about it. If your economic life, your daily stress, and your closest colleagues are based in San Francisco, Tokyo, and London, but your physical life, where you sleep, walk your dog, and buy groceries, is in a small town in Ohio,
Yeah.
where do you actually live? If our primary vibrant communities are purely digital, who is left to care about the local neighborhood association or the town council? Think about how your physical footprint and your digital footprint are splitting next time you log on for the day.
It is a profound shift in human organization that we are really only just beginning to measure. The storm really did change everything.
It did. The hurricane forced us all inside, but the economic house we emerged from is bigger, vastly more complex, and structurally entirely different than the one we left behind. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.